I can't thank you all enough for joining tonight. We have an amazing, panel of distinguished men of color. Welcome to Chop It Up, Raleigh Durham area, which extends to quite a few counties in the greater Triangle area, but an opportunity for us to chop it up and talk with men of color that are doing amazing things, but really and truly, we need to be engaging fellow men of color as Democrats, and the policies and the messaging and the types of conversations that we need to have now. This series was started during the campaign, and as a part of a DNC effort that turned into Shop Talk, which myself and many others got a chance to take part in during the 2020 election. If you could mute just to make sure we don't get background noise. And I have to unmute myself. One of the things that we saw is that a lot of men of color, especially Black men, needed and wanted an outlet to talk about the responsiveness to their concerns, and so we decided through the North Carolina Democratic Party, myself and Floyd McKissick and Hughes are co-chairing this effort. We had a statewide kickoff, and a lot of you had the chance to enjoy that. We went over to Fayetteville area and the Sand Hills with Garland Pierce and Charles Graham and a host of young brothers who are in elected office at the county level. And now we're to the Triangle. We're going to go over to Charlotte and Eastern North Carolina, as well as the Triad, to really get to the point of understanding what we need to do now and not waiting until the election cycle to have this kind of real dialogue around the things that impact our communities. And so I want to go around and highlight each of those who will be serving as panelists tonight. In our very first one, we had someone who gave a reference to the way that we practice our faith. Now, I grew up Pentecostal, and so I don't think that anyone needs to take a Pentecostal a version of the way that they speak tonight, because they don't have time frames. But we're going to like Courtney probably is an AME guy. Like Gailliard, Gailliard, you probably manage your ship pretty tight. So we're going to take the Gailliard version of a minute to talk about who you are and why you think men of color need to be engaged at a high level and at an early level with the Democratic Party. And so David Dixon, the chair of the Durham Democratic Party, I'll pass it over to you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Representative Hawkins. Good evening, everyone. Again, David Dixon, he and pronouns. Chair for Durham County Democratic Party. I've been serving as chair for the past 2 years. Was most recently reelected this April to serve a second term as chair, thankfully to lead our great county here in Durham. A lot of good work this past 2 years, and really looking forward to leading the charge. We know that Durham leads the state in a lot of areas, not just our Eagles here, but when it comes to voting, we know that Durham is a leader across the state. So definitely looking forward to continuing this effort, continuing this drive, and just really connecting with some of our smaller counties. Myself, I'm from Salisbury, North Carolina, Rowan County. So really looking forward to see how Durham, Orange, Wake, how these larger counties that get an abundance of resources every year, how we can really connect with some of our smaller counties that need help. That's what I'm here for. I think I may be the youngest person on this panel tonight, so really looking to see also how we can make sure our millennials and our Gen Z, I think that may be the next folks up, how we can make sure they're prepared to take over for, when it's our turn, when it's our time. Thank you, Representative Hawkins.
Fantastic. Senator McKissick, Commissioner McKissick.
Dr. Bobby Richardson asked me to co-chair this effort, and it was my pleasure and honor to do this with Matt Hughes and with Representative Hawkins. Most of you know me. I served in the state Senate for 13 years and City Council in Durham for 8 years, and currently serve the Utilities Commission. I think the critical thing is that we begin this conversation now. We don't want to wait to 60 days or 90 days before an election and go out and portion this state and try to generate excitement and enthusiasm for people running for whatever the office may be, whether it's school board, whether it's county commissioner, whether it's town council or city council, or whether you're running for a statewide office. We want to build the momentum now because we got to build that political infrastructure, particularly among Black men. I mean, last go round, unfortunately, about 12% of African-American men that voted for Trump. We don't need that. We need to connect with them. We need to resonate with them. We need to explain the issues in ways that they understand, but more importantly, to listen attentively to them and localize the issues that excite them, that they want to see addressed, because that's the way we're going to get things done. And we build the capacity, not just so it turns out in 2022 or 2024, but it turns out each and every time there's a local election coming along, so we can finally get back a majority in the North Carolina General Assembly as well.
Oh, fantastic! Right on time. And I see our other co-chair, Commissioner Matt Hughes.
Thanks, Representative Hawkins, and thank y'all for being here. I believe it's really important for us to not only elevate the voices that are here in this Zoom right now, but also the voices that we don't always also talk about as people of color, particularly men of color. And one of the things that I think about, and one of the things that I definitely have those uncomfortable conversations about as a Democrat and as a man of color, is also intersectionality and being an LGBTQ person, and that those issues are also issues that people of color and men of color should be concerned with. I'm one of two openly LGBTQ Black men in office in North Carolina. The other one is Cecil Brockman. So you don't have to keep a list. There's only two of us. But having those conversations, because that's a critical part of our community that also we've got to show the love for and bring into these conversations too.
Fantastic. And the man who keeps us straight in the North Carolina House, Robert Relves. Well, he keeps Raymond Smith and James Gilliard straight in the North Carolina House. So,
and I'm glad this meeting is being recorded. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Robert Relves, House Democratic leader, represent District 54, all of Chatham County, southwest corner of Durham. I can just reemphasize what everybody's saying. I always determine importance by how important is the subject to everybody else. And clearly, based on what you heard from Commissioner McKissick, Black men must be important because that's who the Republicans are spending all their time picking off. They pick us off when we're deliberating on bills in the General Assembly. They pick us off out here in the voting areas. Everybody spends their time coming in and picking us off. And so men of color have got to understand, one, that means something, good and bad. And two, that the only power we've got, as my brother Raymond Smith says all the time, is each other. That's it. And if we stick together, we can get great things to happen. But if we spend our time trying to figure out how to take care of ourselves and not take care of anybody else, we all fall. And our greatest moments in this country have been when we have all banded together. The time for fighting and infighting and backbiting and all that stuff, we can do that when we get the majority back and we run everything. But right now, we need each other. So, and think about it. I mean, if some of us on this call, like the Reverend Mark Anthony Middleton, like Councilman Branch, we're willing to work with, the Raymond Smiths of the world and the Zach Hawkins and, with their purple and gold, anything can happen. So let's stick together, guys. Appreciate you.
Yeah, and so we go over to another man of Omega, Senator Toby Fitch, a veteran of not only the North Carolina House, but now the North Carolina Senate. He's seen a lot. And so, Senator Fitch, we'd love to hear why you think this is important, why this men of color engagement is important.
Thank you, Zach. I'm Milton F. Toby Fitch. I serve in the North Carolina Senate representing District 4, which is Wilson, Edgecombe, and Halifax counties. I've got about 40 plus odd years of service to the state of North Carolina, 20 years in the House before becoming a Superior Court judge, 18 years on the bench, and now I'm back to the legislative branch. It is important. I agree with Robert. I agree with Floyd. Black men have a unique place on the face of this earth, and that is that we were born to lead. And it is time for us to regain our rightful place as leaders and quit being followers. We all win, as Robert just indicated, when we pull together. We never will win when we pull apart. I'll give you a moment for a slight lesson that I learned some years ago in the North Carolina House, where people who thought like me were not in the majority. While Democrats did control, we did have some problems with Democrats who did not see it the same way we saw it. 8 people, most of which it was a biracial situation, but they were all not all men. There were 2 women. Myself, Mickey Michaud, Dan Blue, Howard Hunter, Alma Adams, Mary McAllister, uh, Hensley, Bob Hensley, and up in the mountains. Come on, Courtney, help me. Martin Nesbitt. 8
Yeah, I was
people.
good.
8 people changed the course of the way we conducted business. And that's exactly where we are today. As a minority, if we don't watch it, we will get picked off because they'll come to you to get help. When the Republicans had a supermajority, they didn't ask Democrats for anything. Now they need you because there's a thing that I used to oppose called the governor's veto. When the governor of North Carolina vetoes, and that veto is in our interest, if we sell out, we lose all of the power that we have. Both the House and the Senate need to understand that we need to get together more, understand each other's philosophy more, but realize that the good of the whole is better than the sum total of the individual. And we all will prosper when we pull together. It's a pleasure to be here with you, such a distinguished group. But you guys have got your colors mixed up, and I tried to unmute before to tell Raymond that since he had your ear, that y'all really need to look and listen to what he's saying. I don't worry about crimson and cream, nor do I worry about that black and gold. The only color is purple and gold.
Oh man, it's a reason you're my favorite. Um, but thank you for that wisdom, and sticking together is absolutely essential. And so, Senator Chaudhuri, you get that lesson. You probably hear that lesson from him quite a bit, and love to hear your view, side, and from your perspective about why you think this kind of engagement is important.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Hawkins, for letting me be here with the absolute all-star team. I think a lot has been said already, but I'm going to bring my unique perspective to the group here tonight. I mean, I think number one, we know that in the 2020 election, we underperformed with Black and Brown communities, particularly men. I've looked at the analysis on some of the precincts where we really got to get turnout up. So that's definitely a challenge if we want to go forward in 2022 and 2024. And I think, as has been said, I think there's going to be a real concerted effort in the Republicans focusing not only on Black men, but Asian American men too. I mean, I'll tell you, I got a text the other day from a small business owner who is, clearly being persuaded by this idea that we're headed for inflation, that they can't hire, workers and so forth, and they're placing the blame straight on the Democratic Party. Secondly, I think it's important, as Floyd talked about, that we localize these elections. I think there's been a lot of good work. Senator Fitch has been involved in it intimately around some issues around criminal justice reform, for example, but that we're able to communicate some of the work that we've done in the Senate, in the General Assembly, to folks that have a real interest. And then, lastly, as an Asian American male, I think, to Leader Reeves's point, I mean, we're talking about hanging together, and it's just not only within the Black community, but communities of color. And we've got real challenges, I think, in trying to develop deeper bonds between the Asian American community and the Black community. I am always excited to be in the Senate because we had the second Asian American elected to the North Carolina State Senate, which was Senator Muhammad. And I know he was on a previous Chop It Up call, but Senator Muhammad's like a brother to me. I think spiritually we're aligned and wanting to see the same thing happen with the Democratic Party. And so if there's a way for us to deepen those messages, those relationships, and try to figure out what works in one community may work in the other community. So I'm just incredibly excited to be part of this all-star team, and thank you for having me, Representative Hawkins.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that perspective, and we're so glad to have you. And I'll go now to I see Representative James Gaillard, Reverend Mark Anthony Middleton from Durham, and then Mayor Pro Tem Corey Branch.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be in the number. I'm a little bit of an outlier because I'm not frat, so I'm just gonna wear my HBCU Morehouse stuff. You can tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell him much. And so I'm glad to be with you. I'm James Gaillard. I represent House District 25, which is Nash County. I actually serve a majority district, and so it's not a whole lot of us running around North Carolina General Assembly. And I'm excited about a panel like this because the reality is that everything that legislation got us into a bunch of the mess we're in, and it's going to take legislation to get us out of the bunch of the mess we're in, particularly as African-American males. And I don't want brothers that may be, watching this or, just watching this to feel like we're disconnected from them, because we're not. The truth of the matter is, if you serve as a Black male in the North Carolina General Assembly, you kind of in a breed by yourself. If you're a female, you got Emily's List and Lillian's List, and you got lots of organizations to cover you. If you're white, that goes without saying, you're covered. But if you're a Black male, a male of color in the General Assembly, it's hard to find your space, hard to get love. And so I think, we really identify with some of the disconnect. Let me share something quickly about my community. Nash County, just under 60,000 people. Well, in Rocky Mount, rather, just under 60,000 people. There are almost 6,000 disconnected 16 to 19-year-olds, the majority of whom are African-American just in Rocky Mount alone. That's 10% of the population that does not go to school and does not have a job. If you look at our area LA head, or where our Upper Coastal Plain Council of Government is, Nash, Edgecombe, Wilson, Halifax, and Northampton County, that number of disconnected 16 to 19-year-olds, the overwhelming majority of them are young people of color. That number approaches nearly 20,000 people. And so there's been lots of good legislation. I would even argue the best legislation that's been drafted this session has pretty much been put in the trash can by Republicans. And we have to recognize, until we come out in massive numbers, in my race alone, 3 to 4 lowest performing precincts were African-American precincts. The 3 to 4 highest performing precincts were majority white precincts. One of my precincts that was low performing, had it been higher performing, that one precinct alone in Rocky Mount, in Nash County, in rural North Carolina, that one precinct alone with a better turnout would have Sherry Beasley as state Supreme Court justice right now. So we have to micromanage this process. We have to chop it up at the precinct level. And Representative Hawkins, I'm hoping we start chopping it up literally, not just regionally, not just in terms of our districts, but literally chopping it up at the precinct level. And so really excited to be with you, brothers. I have mad love and respect for all of you, and I appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, Zach, and to all of you. First off, let me say, as a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, some of you younger organizations just kill me. You just break me up. It's good to be with all you brothers. As I look around the screen, it's a bit overwhelming. So let me just be celebratory for a moment. I've voted for many of you. I've quoted many of you. I've followed many of you in the media. I've patronized your businesses. I've talked about you at cocktail parties and gathering, good stuff. So to have us all together at once on the screen, it feels like the Endgame portal scene. I just want to say assemble to see all of you at one time. So this is a great honor for me tonight and a special night. I'm a proud North Carolina Democrat, but I think what's important about tonight for me really transcends partisan affiliation. or even the machinations of what we need to do as a party, as men of color. I think it's important for us to talk because I'm just tired of folks talking about us while we're in the room, as if we can't tell that they're talking about us. I have watched whole news programs where they've gone an hour, 2 hours, and used all these code words and code phrases without talking about men of color, but I knew who they were talking about. I'm tired of people writing dissertations about our absence or the importance of our presence, people speculating about our pathology by virtue of DNA and birth. I'm just tired of all of that. I think it's important for us to talk back and to dictate the conversation that's had about us. So for me, even beyond the machinations of partisan calculus, it's just good for us to claim our own voice and to speak up and not let anybody else fill in the blanks for us or define us for ourselves. So kudos, Zach, and to the co-chairs. I'm just honored to be a part. Looking forward to the conversation. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, everyone. It's good to be in the number. And being around all of you, I've watched some of you and learned a lot. Some of you I've watched and continue to learn from, day in and day out. And one of the things that, Representative Relves stated, we do have to stick together. And part of that sticking together is showing up for each other, being there, being in the number and building relationships. As I sit on council now, my 6th year here in Raleigh, for 5 years, we've always had that one African-American that was on the council. And it would happen to always be an African-American male. And, in a city that's 25%, 25 to 29% African-American, you say, why do you only have one? We finally got a second, but that was by appointment. So we'll see at the next election how, the city feels about, that representation, but that comes from us pushing each other and helping each other and continue lines of communication. One thing that I always say is we got to meet people where they are, go to going to the barbershops, meeting people. A lot of times we talk about the churches, but not all of our, Black men go to church, so we got to find out where they're going. And, as we go out and participate, and supporting each other, that's what it comes down to. Yeah, I know what it's like, to be with fellow council members and someone come to you and think you're the camera guy. That happened to me. No, I'm not the camera guy, I'm a councilman. So we just have to make sure that as we stick together, as we continue to talk and communicate, that, we build relationships. When we see each other speaking hello, regardless of any other affiliation. For some of us, you hear us talk about fraternities and everything. It's all love because we all know each other. HBCUs, I give Courtney a hard time all the time that he went to the best university in Durham. Going to Central. It is the best university in Durham. No offense to anyone else, but being a proud Aggie, it's all love. So again, building those relationships so we can have this jabbing and back. But at the end of the day, we put in the work. And people want to see us work. And part of that work is showing up.
Oh, thank you for that. And seems like I'm rounding out the Divine Nine here. Representative James Robertson, one of the newest members of the North Carolina House. We have Representative Raymond Smith, Leonardo Williams, and we'll end with Courtney Crowder. Rookie mistake, unmute.
You're still muted. You're still muted, James.
I'll speak for you, James.
That's a rookie mistake. That's a rookie mistake, not a Sigma mistake. All right. So thank you, Representative Hawkins. And thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. I think it's important as a member of the Knightdale community, as an African-American male that served on the Knightdale Town Council for at least 13 years and served as mayor of Knightdale. And during that tenure, the majority of the time,
I found myself being the only African American and Black male on that governing board. And during that time, I faced a lot of challenges, because then you began to see the behavior of your counterparts that you don't wish to see, and that is somewhat disappointing. And so it was important for me as an elected official for the town of Knightdale to mobilize and strategize. And we put a strategy in place where we focus very heavily on bringing diversity to our governing board. I'm proud to say today we have our very first African-American female mayor in the history of Knightdale. We have some council members that are people of color, and we continue to recruit. We have a young African-American male for whom I'm endorsing this election. And the importance of that is to have these frank conversations with these African-American males to let them know that you do and you should have a place at the table. I was given the opportunity to have a place at the table. I was surrounded by love and support over the years, and it has afforded me to be in the position that I'm in today. It is important for me to pay it forward. And I think as a collective group, it is important that we embed ourselves in the communities first and foremost. So often we speak from a distance, but when we embed ourselves in the community, I think that's when we will have a tremendous impact. So Representative Hawkins, in your district, if there's an opportunity for me to come to your district, Senator Blue's district, to speak to these young men and just have a frank conversation. And I'll be honest with you, through my conversations, a lot of these young men just want to be heard, not lectured, but heard. And so often we fall into that trap of, sending the wrong message and trying to tell them what they need to do instead of just listening to their challenges. And I think we have the wonderful opportunity to do this. Commissioner McKissick just mentioned earlier, it is important, it is imperative that we make sure that we reach out to these folks in a timely manner and not wait until the last minute, not wait until 6 months out or 60 days out. Now is the time for us to reach out and bring these young folks in and empower and engage these young folks. It is important that we all come up with succession planning for our positions, for our previous positions, and this will give us the opportunity to recruit and support a lot of these young men and help these young men uplift themselves and have a place at the table. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity to be a part of such a distinguished group of Americans. I want to start out by talking about that very thing. We oftentimes allow people to define who we are. And that's something that we need to take control of. We need to take control of that narrative. I'm Representative Raymond E. Smith Jr. I represent House District 21, which encompasses Wayne and Sampson counties, Goldsboro, Clinton. I served on the Board of Education, first African-American to ever win the at-large seat in the history of my community at any level. So to say that what can and cannot be done, Wayne County is as red as a county as you'll get. I am an enigma. I should not exist. Like my seatmate, we both represent rural North Carolina. One of the things as Democrats we have to acknowledge is that in rural North Carolina, we are not well represented. We do have a tremendous amount of representation in our urbanized areas, but our rural areas do not bode well when it comes to elections. We've got a lot of work to do in rural North Carolina. But again, as I said before in my introduction, we have to stop allowing other people to define us. This entire conversation about critical race theory, it's not a conversation, it's reality, it's a fact. Look around you. Look around the fact that, you know, you have, we represent what, 13% of the population, yet we represent 95% of the jail population. Those numbers, that's not a theory, that's a fact. We need look no further than what is in front of us. So I don't even allow people to engage me in that conversation. I just say, look around you, take a look at what the reality is. And it's not a theory, it's a fact. Lastly, you know, there's this narrative that Black men are not patriotic. I don't know where that came from. The first soldier to die, the youngest soldier to die in Vietnam was a young Black Marine, Private First Class Dan Bullock. He was from my hometown of Goldsboro, North Carolina. He changed his birth certificate so he could go into the military at the age of 14. And he died at the age of 15, serving this country. I too am a United States Army veteran. So no one can tell me about my patriotism and my commitment to this country. We've got to stop allowing people to define us. So that being said, everything that was said before, I echo, I support, but we need to, as my seatmate said, Reverend Gaillard, we've got to really take this to the precinct level. We've got to knock on those doors at the local level, because I was talking to my party chair down in Sampson County. He was at a convention and he met the Republican Party chair, who said that of the 23 precincts that they had 20 of them organized. My chair said, wow, I was embarrassed. We only have 5 precincts organized in our district. And it's a wonder why we keep getting our hind parts handed to us in rural North Carolina. So we've got work to do. Thank you for this opportunity.
Am I next, Zach? Cool. It's good to see everybody be here on the screen with you. Just out of amusement, I'm going to add to the swiping. Haven't said anything much, but I'm also a brother of Alpha Phi Alpha, and also went to NC Central. But just a bit more kindred for me. Representative Gilliard, I remember you from visiting my mom's house out in Rocky Mount, Yolanda Bailey. And Representative Fitch, Senator Fitch, I'm born and raised in Hobgood, North Carolina, but I'm a Durhamite now. And you know, a small business owner here in Durham. And you know, this panel tonight, not only is it an honor to serve on here, but it's also so pivotal. You know, you think about the 15 of us on the screen, and you think about our backgrounds and all of what we bring to the table. You know, you take that, and that gives you, just alone with us, the amount of options in which we can mentor to our younger brothers. This is so important, because we do have to play a vital role in keeping us from being the product and converting us more into the producers, if that makes sense. You know, I think someone mentioned earlier the statistics about how many Black men are in prison. You know, so we are this product of a system that has oppressed us. You know, but as a small business owner, it's my duty to make sure that I create, as we said, succession planning, not only in public office but also in professional status. We have to have a succession plan for that as well. So, you know, we're about to hire 50 folks. You know, I need to make sure that I'm hiring, you know, folks that are going to be able to, you know, get access to a higher income. You know, small businesses have to facilitate that evolution to a higher minimum wage. Not wait on the government. You know, it's up to us to lead, and it's up to you guys who are elected officials to legislate that leadership that we're providing for you. And if we can set this example in the private area, in the private sector, you know, and provide you all something to work with in the legislative arena, then I think we have a formula. You know, so I think that's why this is so important, to start having this mass conversation, because I know almost everybody on the screen, but we never really get a chance to get together like this. Imagine how powerful and impactful this is on a more normal basis, on a regular basis. So I hope that this is the beginning of something that is to come much more often. Thank you guys so much for the time.
Yep, and I know I think I'm wrapping us up in terms of the opening, but I just want to say, just from the outset, how much I love, appreciate, honor everybody on the screen, because have a relationship with every one of you, and you know exactly what it means. So I definitely appreciate it, and just want to start off by saying that. I'll also echo a couple of things that have been said already, particularly I think my brother Coy Branch, talked about the need to be active, and the need to be involved in community. I think it's been stated by everyone in one way or another about being present and being in the community. And I'll share a quick personal story just to that effect. Back in 1991, I was a freshman in high school, and I was always in class, goofing off, talking too much. I know that surprises no one. But I was, but I always was, on honor roll, had great grades and the whole nine, but I would always end up in the principal's office. One time I went to the principal's office, and he called my mom, who was at work that day, of course, and said to her that, Courtney is going to be the next Dan Blue or the next statistic. And at that time in 1991, I had no idea who Dan Blue was, but I started studying and figuring out exactly who he was. Like, what name is he calling me? What is he talking about? Of course, a man of Alpha, North Carolina Central University graduate, Duke University. I think I've tried my best to emulate and follow a lot of the example that was set. He's heard me, you guys, many of you have heard me tell that story 1,000 times. He certainly has. But I learned an important lesson even in that moment. I've been able to articulate a little bit better over the years that what we all need is, one of three things, probably a mentor, an example, or an ally. And I think that's what we're all called to be by serving the way that we all do in the community, the many ways that we do. It was an honor for me later on. We talk about being involved in the Democratic Party and why that's so important, and why it's so important to have mentors, allies, and examples in this work, and be those things to the community, to other Black men that are coming up. I had that transformative experience as a teenager, not even knowing who that man was, but later on to become the first Black president of the Young Democrats of North Carolina, and to be in relationship with so many of you. I mean, I've been following Toby Fitch around. Anyway, it's just to be that example, and to find those allies, and to find those ways to mentor and help engage one another and support one another along the way is incredibly important. So initiatives like this, efforts like this, conversations like this, it means a lot, because I think if we all are, we align ourselves, support each other, the change that we can make is so incredibly important, and it's needed right now. So I'll wrap by just saying that. And again, I appreciate and honor every one of you guys so much.
Oh, thank you. All stars. And so I can't wait for people to see us. We appreciate the 36 to 38 folks that, including you all that joined tonight. And this, of course, will be live streamed, because, the goal of the Chop It Up series is to engage men of color, to see them, to see us having these conversations. And to Representative Gaillard's point, we want to take this as far as possible. So that means the reason for doing these in a regional setting is because the next thing that we want to do is we want to take it to your county. And then, for the multiple counties that are in Wake County alone, for the multiple cities that are in Wake County alone, break them down into there, and then go to the precinct level. Have them in your barbershops. Have them wherever you think that men of color are, and find a way to have small settings or large settings to have the conversation, because James Robinson said something so important, that people just want to be heard. They just want to be heard, and we need to provide that opportunity. I do want to recognize that we have Councilman Braxton Winston on. Thank you for being here. We have Commissioner Gomez with us. We have Antoine Marshall, who's a part of the original Shop Talk series. So I want to make sure that I recognize those brothers who have joined us and are willing to be in conversation tonight. And so I'll start with brothers that are serving at the local level with this question, and then of course anyone that wants to to chime in, you can. And Commissioner Gomez, please feel free to hop into this conversation. Do you think that our local, state, and national government is currently moving in the right direction in a way that will benefit people of color? And if not, what is one way that we can, specifically related to the ways that we can engage and benefit men of color? So I'll start with you, Commissioner Gomez.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Franklin Gomez Flores. I'm Commissioner from Chatham County, from 5th District. To me, I think there's a great conflict between time available with individuals. I come from a district that has the lowest income or average income in my county, and high percentage rate of single family homes or single parent homes. And so to me, I realized that a lot of families, particularly minority families, struggle with just the economics of their daily lives, making an ends meet. And so at least many members here have multiple jobs, multiple employments. And so to then go back home and cater to their families, I guess they don't have enough time to really dig into the details of politics or even engage beyond being informed.
No, thank you. Any of my brothers for this locally serving that want to respond to that?
So, Councilman Branch here. I think it depends. Draw this picture. My district has 93,000 people. My district also includes the governor's mansion and the Raleigh Rescue Mission. So I have a very diverse population just within the African American community. We have doctors and lawyers, and we have homelessness and those that are under income. I think depending on individuals, where some are, what's going on right now is serving them well because they're engaged. They understand the programs, they understand the services that are out there, and they benefit from it. But then there's a segment that it is not serving. It's a segment that isn't aware of the opportunities that are there, or they've have some type of issue. Could it be, criminal, or just lack of education, or lack of opportunity to really prosper in this environment? And we have to find a way to reach those. That's the segment, that the population we have to find a way to reach and touch. And it is something that I try to figure out every day. It's a challenge, it's a fight, but it's something that we just have to realize that, within our own African American community, I have business owners, Oak City Fish and Chips, it's in my district. African American runs it. So he's doing, pretty well. He's engaged. But again, I have those that, we're trying to figure out right now where they're going to live by the end of the month, because the property they live in has been sold. So those are the challenges that on the local level that we face. And, I definitely look forward to more conversation and working with our state representatives and how we can, try to assist and help those that, really need it.
No, thank you. I see James Robinson, David Dixon, and Matt Hughes. Then we'll go to the next question.
Thank you, Representative Hawkins. I would tell you, my tenure as an elected official, I've always made an effort to recruit, especially folks of color and men of color. They show interest, but part of the challenge is once they find out that local government doesn't pay, they're turned off and they're ready to go the other way. And it's important for us to articulate and express to them the importance of serving your community and having a place at the table. It's not about the money, it's about your community. It's about when your streets will get paved. It's about when your kids will have educational opportunities and scholarship opportunities. And that can be realized if you have a place at the table. That has been a challenge for us in the eastern portion of Wake County. I mentioned on the front end of my conversation that we have made an assertive effort to recruit folks of color to serve on our governing board. And I'm proud to say that the majority of the folks on our governing board are Democrats now. That wasn't always the case for many years, but through strategic planning, we were able to realize this opportunity. The momentum is there now. And we have the wonderful opportunity of bringing this young man that has served on our land use review board. He's solid as they come. He's from Rocky Mount, Representative Gelia, and he's going to do some phenomenal things. But it is important that we stress to these young folks, it's not about the money, it's about our community. That's how you can get your trash picked up in a timely manner, your leaves picked up in a timely manner, your roads paved, and other opportunities that will benefit your community. So I think we have some work to do on that end. How we do that, I'm not sure, but I think collectively as a group, we can put our heads together and strategically plan to make sure we're able to achieve some of these goals and getting these folks involved in local government. And I would quickly say, as the mayor of Knightdale, we installed an initiative where all of a sudden we have quite a few Title I schools in the area. And one of the Title I schools is the Neuse River Middle School, where it is predominantly Hispanic and African Americans. So what we've done, we created a program where these young folks can come in and learn about local government. So they get to sit in the mayor's seat, the town council seat, they get to work with the staff. These are job opportunities for these young folks later on in life that they would not otherwise know about, that pay a decent salary and get them more involved. So those type of initiatives, I think, will realize opportunities for our young folk and for members of our community.
Thank you, Representative Hawkins. So just to run that back, your question was around whether our local governments are helping people of color, if they're moving in the right direction, correct? So looking, if we look at Durham, we can look around the state, we see that we have city councils, we have board of commissions that are predominantly people of color. But then if you look around the city itself, you see gentrification happening for all of our historic neighborhoods, which is just clearly the new form of redlining. We see that wages for our workers, working class people, which are predominantly people of color, predominantly Black people, around our cities and counties, wages aren't increasing. On one hand, we know that, or folks that may not know, the state legislature back in 2016 preempted our local cities and counties from raising their minimum wages. But we do see in a lot of cities that, Durham, for instance, city council put it in place that, city workers are now making $15 an hour. You look at the area median income for Durham, $15 an hour is still not enough. You look at the area median income for Raleigh, $15 an hour is still not enough. So I think they are moving in the right direction. Do I think they are doing enough? I do not. Do I think that they are truly challenging the systems that have been in place since Jim Crow, as we see this resurgence of Jim Crow? I do not think our city leaders, our county leaders are doing enough to push that ball forward and to really challenge, like I said, the systems that have been in place for years now. We can look at the actual structure and the actual employee structure of our cities and counties. When we look, again, rolling back here into Durham, like I said, we have a predominantly people of color led city council. We have a predominantly people of color led board of commissioners, all women. I think that may be one of the few counties in the state that we can say all of our county commissioners are women. But then if we look at the economic and workforce development departments within these cities and county structures, if you look at the work, the community engagement departments within these cities and county government structures, they're still predominantly white. So who are they possibly going to be connecting with within our community that really needs to hear what the city and what the county can and are doing for them? I've been sitting in on some of the community ambassador meetings for the city council as we're looking forward to, as they are looking to put out their comprehensive plan for the next 10 years of Durham. The majority of that, comprehensive planning team for Durham is white. How is that helping our communities? We speak on Hayti so often, we speak on Old East Durham so often, but we are not, as a government structure, we are not actually doing the work to help our people. A lot of things that are going on are really, it's not for show. A lot of good work is happening. But again, when we have Black people, we have people of color who are starting behind the 8 ball, we have to reach further than the bridge of our nose to really make sure we are engaging with these voters, really make sure we're engaging with these people, just people, voting aside. We have to make sure we're truly extending that arm and fellowship and friendship to make sure people are hearing from us. When I go on campus at NCCU, when I go over at Duke to try to register voters, they vote presidential cycle, perhaps midterm cycle. They are not voting our city council races, even though they are living in Durham for 4 years. And Durham, being the beautiful city it is, most of those graduates are going to live in Durham after they graduate. And folks are still not hearing from our city council members. They're not hearing from our county commissioners on why they should be involved with the inner workings of our city. So
thank you. Just until now, I didn't know you were Pentecostal. No, that was amazing engagement. And so I think that you're right, that all levels of government need to engage in. Matt?
Well, and I think that some of the challenges, though, for local government, a lot of the towns and communities that David was talking on, and it's true, most of us are part of the NC Black Alliance and its associated, umbrella organizations. A lot of those places, like my own town, is a very small place, 10,000 people, not a large budget, not a lot of town staff. And so in some ways we're limited in what we can do without greater policy making powers from the General Assembly. But on the things that we can change, land use planning to make affordable housing more affordable, making sure that we have accountability in police and in policing is stuff that's within our power to do and something that we should be doing. I'm someone who does not accept small thinking. If we can make policy changes, let's do it. Let's tackle it. Let's make sure that we're using historically underutilized businesses. Let's make sure that when we're hiring out contractors, that they're paying their contractors that they're paying their employees a living wage as part of doing business with us. $15 an hour is great, but none of our employees, especially those who are in lower level positions, who are disproportionately also people of color, are making less than a living wage. That was tough. That was hard for us, particularly not having a high tax base. We could raise taxes to create more initiatives, but in raising property taxes, which is a regressive tax, we're then taxing out the same people that we're trying to help that's living in the community, in one of the communities that already has the highest collective tax rate in the entire state of North Carolina. And so it ends up becoming very, very hard, very difficult. But I would say I have been doing what I can do to bring in more people of color on these advisory boards, and that's very important in shaping the future of the town, whether it's in planning or we have a board that does exclusively tourism funding. What are we funding that's going to bring more diverse people into town? For a town that is 30% people of color, I'm often the most visible person of color in town that people recognize, because a lot of our advisory boards, the people who are arguably more impacted or disproportionately impacted by these decisions are not present, because my mostly white colleagues are not reaching out to folks to recruit them to come on board. They're not, because for so long in a town that's 5.5 square miles, it's not hard to get from one end of the town to the other. And there are people who still live with the legacies of the places they weren't allowed to go into, that they weren't welcomed, or they had to go into the back of the shop to get their meal to take home to their family. They couldn't walk through the front door. Or when we did have movie theaters, they were sitting in segregated movie theaters. So those are stories that people still remember, and it still guides them. And until someone intentionally is invitational to bring them in, rather than just say, oh, there's no one out there, we've got to do it. When we started a reimagining public safety task force, our mayor, who mostly led the effort, good person, I love her, mostly led the effort, we couldn't appoint anyone for almost 2 months because the only people who were applying were white, because we weren't doing the intentional outreach to our people of color in the community to apply for that board. And that's a problem when folks don't feel like they can contribute, because it's like they're not respected, or they're not respected enough that their opinion matters. And that's something that I've been trying to change, but you can't undo 200 some years of history in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, you can try though.
You can, and that's what I'm doing.
And Matt, I appreciate you shouting out the North Carolina Black Alliance, because as everyone knows, I've served as executive director of that organization now for almost 10 years. And having an organization that creates space for Black elected officials at every level of government to come together alongside advocates and policy leaders and continue to think about ways to activate in our communities using those networks is the purpose, and it is the reason, and it quite frankly brings to life a lot of, I think, of the energy we're creating tonight by this conversation. But I do have a question I want to pose, and Zach and I are doing sort of a two-step. We're going to go alpha and omega the rest of the night on posing these questions. But the next question, and I really want to throw it to our legislators to speak on. Everyone has an opinion, but I certainly want to toss it to our lawmakers and Representative, Judge, Senator Fitch, and Leader Relves in particular. We've had this ongoing conversation in all of our communities about criminal justice reform, rehabilitation, and punishment, and just what is the realistic reforms that we are focusing on, that we can focus on, that we can engage community and bring some alignment. So if you can take a few minutes and just talk to us a little bit about how you sort of see that those reforms, particularly in the face of systemic racism that we know is really at the center of much of it. So maybe Senator Fitch and then Representative Relves, or whoever can respond. And Senator Fitch, you're on mute if you're speaking. I see you.
Courtney, that's a very, very interesting and important question. Having been a part of the criminal justice system for right at 50 years, both as a practicing attorney and 18 years as a judge, I think we've made a good first step. We took the facts as they came to us in a situation, and it pretty much involved itself based off of the Brown case down in Elizabeth City, to try to bring some sunlight into the issue of when can a family know and see the body cams in order to be able to make a determination of what actually happened. The problem that we have in North Carolina and elsewhere is that in a lot of places, body cams aren't even used. So we have to mandate that, and then we did, in fact, instead of being able to get a 72-hour situation, we got in a 90-hour situation, to which I think the House is still holding to, and that we'll be able to pass. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. We've got to root out these bad actors who are in the police department, who a gun, a badge have been given to, and they are talking about protecting and serving. it is important that we are able to reestablish the respect and trust from our community to the law enforcement community. And unless we can do that, then we're just whistling in the wind and nothing will change and things will continue to deteriorate in our own communities. Then we need to do some self-help and a little more teaching in our own communities as to what our young men ought to know and what they ought to do and what they should be about. Until we can address that issue ourselves, we're going to catch a lot of flack as it pertains to the outside world. So I'm hoping that the little bit of legislation that is moving can grow and that we can improve upon this, if not more this year, certainly in the very near future. The most important thing is to get some of these folks who are in control and in power out of control and out of power such that we can write the laws the way that they ought to be written, which is a little more fair and just to our communities.
Yes, sir. Leader Reeves.
Courtney, I would add on what Senator Fitch is saying. All of his points are excellent points. And then I think there's some other things we've got to do. And a lot of that's got to do with education. One, your question is the key point, is understanding what we can and can't do. And Courtney, I talked to you in particular, last week,
right,
about our lack of understanding, some of us, of what our realistic landscape is. We can't pretend that we've got 120 Courtneys sitting in the House of Representatives. We don't.
Right.
We got 69 non-Courtneys and we got 1 Courtneys. And so, we walk in there expecting that, hey, we've got all these reforms we want and we're just going to make it happen. And that's not how it works. You got to have the votes. And that's basic education about how government works. And what I found is, and not because of ignorance of people, we don't have people who are ignorant people that don't understand this. I'm telling you, people who are friends, family members, well-educated, but they just haven't kept up with how the government works. So that's one of the things you got to do. And to Senator Fitch's point, right after George Floyd, the first interview I did, I was talking and people were saying, what do we got to do to these police? What do we got to do to police? And Senator Fitch's point is the actual point. You got to fix the atmosphere. Your chief of police decides what kind of police department you're going to have. Your city council hires your chief of police through their city manager. That's number one. Number two, every person on here, I can promise you, your DA ran either unopposed or just about unopposed. And when the Elizabeth City shooting happened and the DA there said that, hey, I don't think that there was anything wrong with that shooting, when asked a real and serious, considerate question, what do we do if we disagree with your opinion? He gave the flippant answer of, beat me at the ballot box. And it takes nothing to win those races, nothing. But we don't invest in those type of races. Right now, while the Republicans are putting together a national pact to start dropping $50, $100, and $150,000 on candidates in school board races to fight over critical race theory, we're still catching up to even realizing, just like one of the brothers was saying earlier, that these local races matter. City council matters, county commissioner matters, school board matters, DA matters. And so to me, that's how you fix it. And another thing we've got to fix that we don't talk about enough is we got to stop discouraging Black people from going and brown people from going into law enforcement.
Right.
The easiest way to make a guy going out here treating people of color badly is making him come home to people of color. You think a guy's going to go out here and beat on some poor Black kid and then come back and he's got a Black major, Black lieutenant, Black captain he's dealing with, Black chief of police, and a bunch of Black men sitting in there and Black women for him to come. He's not coming back to a comfortable situation. He's coming back to question. So that's something else we've got to do, because as you said, it's a systemic problem. And it's a systemic problem because those are the areas that we have allowed it to become systemic problems. These local races, we can win. And we can talk about gerrymandering and all these districts and stuff. I'm telling you that if you've got African Americans in your city or county, you will win your local races if you choose to engage in those local races, and people will have to listen.
Absolutely. And I think I think both of those responses are phenomenal because it connects the issues, and it connects it to our ability to be politically active and help move the needle on this. I'm going to go to Representative Galliard and then the Senator Chaudhuri to wrap us up on this topic.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Courtney. It's a great question. You know, I've served for over a year now with the governor's task force for racial equity and criminal justice. I think Senator Fitch, I think Leader Relves is spot on. You know, when I met with the Pasquotank County NAACP, you know, I reminded them that, you know, you're talking about 1,100 votes. You don't like what the DA did. You don't like what the sheriff has done. You know, we can localize these issues. I want to say to everyone, this gives us a great example as to why turning out vote at the precinct level and the local level is so important, because as I alluded to earlier on, the best legislation around racial equity and criminal justice has been drafted. It has been filed, and it has been thrown in the trash by Republicans because we don't have the votes to represent Representative Relves' point. What does that legislation look like? And I'll just touch on some of these just really quickly. It's about expanding criminal justice fellows program. I mean, part of the reason you have bad seeds and bad apples is because you have bad recruitment. And so we've got to recruit, you know, people of color and law enforcement agencies around the state, and it's got to hit all 100 counties. We've got to talk about what training looks like, and standards commissions training have to include things around diversity, equity, inclusion, cultural competency. We got to ban chokeholds and duty to intervene and rendering aid. And so there's so much how we address no-knock warrants, how we define use of force, how we collect data, making sure that that there are body worn and dashboard cameras being used and we can get that footage at the appropriate way. Making sure we don't have wandering officers. And so the list goes on, and I could literally spend decriminalizing marijuana possession. You know, we decriminalize marijuana possession up to 1.5 ounces. It has a massive domino effect on men of color. And so these are all drafts of legislation that we have filed that we want to see get across the finish line. And there's many, many more. Raising juvenile age, we didn't get as far as we wanted to go with that. How we address school discipline. We know there's a pipeline in terms of how we address school discipline, in terms of where that pipeline leads in terms of incarceration. And so a massive reforming of juvenile life sentencing and the cash bail system, right? How that impacts men, particularly of color. And so the list goes on and on. This is legislation that we are pressing hard for. But again, it really is going to determine whether or not we elect people statewide that can give us the numbers so that we can get this legislation passed.
That's perfect. Jay?
Courtney, just want to mention 4 things. One, Representative Galliard is absolutely right. You can sense the energy in his voice because, I mean, he's absolutely right. I mean, I think there was more energy spent on criminal justice reform bills by Democrats in this session than I can ever recall. I mean, on the Senate side, we did 6 months of, we had a working group that Senator Fitch was part of, which we had national and state experts. So a lot of the ideas that you saw came not only from the equity task force that Governor Cooper had, but also just came from the inner workings of what legislators were working on. So, you know, we had, I mean, the criminal justice reform bill that Representative Galliard was talking about also allows for local municipalities. I mean, this is the relationship between state and local municipalities that allow for civilian review boards of law enforcement, right? We can't do that unless we remove that preemption. I worked on, based on my own experience, on driving while black and brown legislation. Full legalization has an equity component to it that can look at economic development and restitution and investments back into the communities that have been hurt and damaged by our war on drugs. So I think Representative Galliard is absolutely right. We've got the legislation. We just need the majority to put that in place. Second thing I want to say is I think that the disconnect that folks don't really understand between what happens at the university system with their board of governors. I think what happened with Professor Nicole Hannah-Jones should be a wake-up call for faculty members, Black and brown faculty members, and the lack of, I think, confidence that they have now in the university system and what's happened. And that is a board that's completely controlled by this General Assembly. Third thing, so who was saying this, talking about the critical race theory issue? Leader Reeves was. So I am very worried about this issue, because I think that the long-term Republican playbook, which they have always been better at than Democrats, is to focus on the grassroots level. They beat us at the state legislative level because they've been investing in those races for years, much more so than Democrats have. My fear is now they've gone one level below with critical race theory, which is completely a manufactured political issue that they have created. And it should be a wake-up call. If it's true that they're spending $150,000 on school board races, they are essentially putting in place the next generation of leaders that are going to start coming through the General Assembly and run for statewide office or Congress. I mean, we should be doing the same thing. Leader Reeves is absolutely right. We've got to recruit candidates from our communities that can run, that can stand up for that issue, because my greatest fear is we know that they are attacking democracy in the ballot box, but there is a huge Democratic component in raising the next generation of Democratic citizens in our public education system, and they are going to destroy that. And that is a great, great fear of mine. And it's really being played on racial lines right now. So I think that's a issue that we need to pay close attention to. Last thing, just on the solution side, because this is such a great gathering here for Courtney, you and Representative Hawkins to think about. So when one of the models I think that we can look at when we're trying to think about knitting this network more formally is what I worked on when I was at the treasurer's office, but we also see with corporate boards, and that is trying to make this network more formal. So there was a lot of discussions about board appointments at the local level, or even at the statewide level. One of the things I did when I was general counsel at the treasurer's office was I had every major law firm that were predominantly white come and do interviews at North Carolina Central Law School, where I'm a graduate. And we talked about the fact that they had to partner with a Black or minority-owned and women-owned law firm to make sure that there was some mentorship involved in that. Now, a lot of this, I'll be honest with you, is just token. They don't actually transfer the knowledge, and you don't actually grow the smaller firms. And so what we did 2 years later is we highlighted case studies of what worked, and we had a conference back again at North Carolina Central to highlight best practices. We had a guy, Professor David Wilkins from Harvard Law School. His wife is actually the agent to Branford Marsalis, so he had a real incentive to come down and speak at this conference. He has studied the importance of diversity in the legal profession. And the thing that he figured out from studying this formally is the way people get references to get references for clients, for law firms, it's based on networks. So the older white guy that's at the corner of the office that decides he needs to look for a lawyer, a law firm to take on a big case, he walks down the hall and he finds somebody that looks like himself. And that's how the referral business comes about. We got to be more intentional about that and looking out for each other on the economic development issues. But just as importantly, I think we can talk about creating a formal database. So one of the things we see in movements to try to diversify corporate boards, which I think in some ways corporate America, Courtney, you can speak to this better than most anybody on this call, but I think you see a stronger push on diversity on the corporate side than we do on the political side. But I think one of the things that we can think about is we can create a formal database of our friends, of folks that we're talking to based on their interests that we can tap into for board appointments, whether it's at the local level to address Matt Hughes's issue, or whether, Governor Cooper or whoever statewide is looking for folks. We can create a database that they tap into those folks so that we're pushing qualified candidates that are also diverse. And that's the power of the network.
And Courtney, I wouldn't mind chiming in on this issue very briefly. I think the thing that we can do, because I think if there's one issue that Black men are concerned about, it is this intersection with criminal justice. And yes, police misconduct is right there at the top. We're talking about excessive use of force, implicit bias, we can really work on that at local levels. And that's where we need to be involved, at the local level, in the urban areas, likewise in the rural areas. That's where we're going to start getting some traction. So let's focus on things that people are concerned about as Black men when they're out there walking every day, or their kids are out there, or their grandkids, or whoever it may happen to be, because that's something that's going to resonate. But let's also talk about things we did get done. And when I say that, I'm thinking about bills I did get passed as a primary sponsor dealing with expunction reform that now allows people who have criminal records, that served their time, that paid their restitution, erase those records essentially, so that they're not handicapped in getting jobs, so that they're not handicapped in renting apartments, so that they do have doors of opportunity open to them. And let's talk about getting some lawyers involved in expunction clinics. Let's talk about doing something that's going to impact their lives directly and individually in a very personal way. You want to connect with people, you want to get them involved, resonate with them on things that's important to them in their lives, just not the intellectual issues or issues that we find important as people that are already elected and already serving. And don't underestimate the capacity for somebody to get out there and preach political rhetoric like Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson and what he can do in appealing to Black men across this state. Don't estimate it when he comes out there and starts talking about critical race theory. Don't underestimate the capacity of the General Assembly to go out there and pass a constitutional amendment to get rid of affirmative action and stop talking about critical race theory in our schools. Why will they do it? Because they want to get the people out in 2022 when we got the US Senate race on the ballot, the same way they have done in the past when it came to the constitutional amendment dealing with same-sex marriage. We ended up being the last state in America to pass that thing. They knew it wasn't going to be around for long, but they knew it would resonate with their voters. We need to be preparing now to understand what their theories might be, why critical race theory is something you hear about on Fox every day, and you're hearing the same rhetoric here in North Carolina. And if you got a Black man like a lieutenant governor out there preaching that stuff, we got to be aware of it and start thinking right now today about what we're going to do to address it. Because whether we like it or not, it's coming. Whether we like it or not, they're going to frame issues. And whether we like it or not, if we don't get out there and start working early, if we don't get out there and start organizing early, if we're not messaging with things that people understand and impacts their lives, then it's time that we did it. Maybe it's also about recreational facilities in communities. Maybe it's about big brother, big sister programs to get people working with the kids in the community. It's a lot that we can do traditionally and non-traditionally. I'm just afraid that if we don't seize the opportunity and we don't start building that capacity now to have that political infrastructure in place, it's not going to be sufficient to just hit the ground running just before the next election cycle.
That's 100% right. And I know that we are moving on to the next question. That was all the comments were well stated and very clear. I think what again, the through line is people don't want to see us talk, they want to see us work, right? I mean, and that's what it really comes down to on all of these issues and how we're bringing these issues into the community, to the courtrooms, to the boardrooms, and into, our law schools and everywhere our folks are. It's going to be important for us to connect the dots in a way that people know what their next move is. I have a lot of talented people that can take these appointed local boards and eventually become candidates, as well as these corporate positions and corporate boards that Jay mentioned. And yeah, we're in the midst of those things. But I know we're moving on to the next question, but I want to thank everybody for responding so thoroughly to that one.
Courtney, can I touch one thing that Jay said?
Yes.
Mine's real brief. Want to make sure when Jay was talking about what people don't understand about the Board of Governors, Board of Trustees, and how that applied to the Nicole Hannah-Jones situation, something that's come up, and I'm just reminding everybody that's connected to HBCUs, a temptation is to think, well, you solve this problem by just sending our kids to HBCUs. And that's a strong temptation, makes sense. That's in effect what Nicole did and had every right to do that. Understand that same Board of Governors runs your HBCU also if it's state funded. So they can pick, for instance, a chancellor that completely does not embody anything that you care about with your school. They can pick boards of trustees for your HBCU that have absolutely nothing to do with your HBCU. And the next thing you know, your safe space is now gone. because you're actually being indoctrinated by people who have nothing to do with your HBCU and don't care about your HBCU. So I want to make sure guys understand this isn't a problem that's just a UNC, NC State problem. Every single state funded school, these guys can take over, and they will. I'm telling you that. I'll say this, at least one HBCU, at least I was given information, from the folks at the HBCU, they were really unhappy with who was chosen to lead their university. And they just didn't realize there's nothing they can do about it. So we've got to educate people. Thanks for bringing that up, Jay. And thank you for letting me intercede, Courtney.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And Robert, you make an amazing point, and Jay's the same about people understanding how the infrastructure and how the systems across North Carolina work and the way that they impact people. But I thought everyone gave incredible answers that now I'll skip to just that around HBCUs, and Raymond Smith can speak to this just about as good as anybody. While we understand those dynamics that they just mentioned, what are ways, how do you see the importance of HBCUs sort of playing a part in building up men of color, building up communities of color, and what we can do to advocate and increase support for our HBCUs?
Thank you for that opportunity. And I'm surprised you're going to let me talk about it and not you, because, we always compete over that. But it is absolutely imperative. HBCUs play a vital role in our communities. One of the things that I often tell people about my experience, and as you can see in the back, I'm a triple HBCU grad. My undergrad, my master's, and my doctorate all came from HBCUs. My education is inferior to no one's, and so I don't have any trepidations whatsoever about what I'm about to say. The long and short of it is, my experience, very much like what Courtney talked about earlier, growing up in my community, I'm a little bit older than some of you younger cats. And so growing up in my community, I saw a lot of firsts. I lived next door to the first African-American that served on this Board of Education for the city of Goldsboro. He's a graduate of A&T State University. I live right around the corner from the first African-American to serve on the city council for the city of Goldsboro. He's a graduate of NCCU. I knew the first African-American to serve on the county commission for Wayne County. These are all Black men who attended HBCUs. So for me, it was a no-brainer. And I understood even then, as a young man growing up in this very rural community, that the people that I saw as heroes were not the people that I saw on television. They were the people that lived in my neighborhood. They were the people who I knew personally. And so for me, that was a catalyst for me to want to be and to aspire to be and to know that I could be. And so that is the critical role that HBCUs continue to play in today's society. They continue to play that role. All of our, Martin Luther King Jr. didn't go to Harvard. He went to Morehouse. Okay, my seatmate is having a moment over there. But it is what it is. And so so for me, we were we being the Legislative Black Caucus, I serve on the executive committee. We had a meeting with the Speaker Moore. Reverend Galliot was there with me, and we met with him, and we talked about HBCUs, and we were very candid. Okay, we did not bite our tongues, we didn't back down, and we talked about the disparity of funding in HBCUs. He understood, acknowledged, and agreed, and he went down the list of infrastructure things that he was agreeing to put into the bill. His admonition is that he wants 120 votes for the budget. Well, that's fine. But rest assured, you're not going to get to that 120 without the HBCUs, the community action agencies. Some of you say you lived in Durham. Well, I lived in Durham too, but I worked for an organization called Operation Breakthrough. That's the community action agency for the Durham area. So we talked about all of these things. We talked about the disparity in funding. So, and as long as we are at the table we can continue to have these conversations. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of money in this budget, especially for infrastructure. But we also challenged him on the basic allocation for these schools. You have two land grant colleges in the state of North Carolina, North Carolina State and North Carolina A&T State University. Both of those schools have the exact same mission. But when you look at the funding, it is terrible when you talk about the disparity in that funding. So until, you will not shut my mouth until we get parity when it comes to funding for HBCUs. So that being said, we're getting there, but the only way for us to get there is to take the majority, as others have said, and to make sure that we place those at the top of the list of our priorities.
I appreciate that, brother. And I think you're exactly right. But I wanted to, since I'm co-hosting tonight, I thought you and I share that passion, so it'd be worth it. And you're, again, another man of Omega, so I knew you could eloquently speak to that issue. But I think nothing is more important than that issue and the diversity. Every company that comes to North Carolina asks about the diversity in our partnerships with HBCUs. And so we know what happened in Maryland, and it's only a matter of time before someone gets the inkling to file suit on the state of North Carolina for their historic underfunding of HBCUs. And so thank you all for that advocacy. Courtney? Or no, I think, did someone unmute? James or? Okay, all right, Courtney.
Yeah, no, and I think, I'm sorry, Representative Galley, you were gonna say?
Real quick, Courtney and Zach, you jumped right in on it. Every time, let's not lose this reality. Every time there is a major announcement that we have landed Google or Apple or whatever major multinational corporation wants to come to RTP or North Carolina, 100% of those companies have diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. Where else are you gonna come except a state with 10 HBCUs? So what happens is our state is benefiting from our HBCUs, but not funding them as if they are equal partners in this growth. So we cannot lose the significance of the volume of HBCUs we have in North Carolina. You know, I have two daughters at UNC Chapel Hill, but I have a son at A&T. And the reality of it is it takes all of these enterprises to make North Carolina what it is. And we must embrace it as a significant reason for our growth and business friendliness in North Carolina. So thank you for letting me jump in, Courtney, real quick on that.
Oh yeah, no problem. And thank you for sharing it. I mean, I think, you know, and I know we're getting close to our time. So I wanted to, you know, maybe just put for the conversation, and I'll come and Mark Anthony, I'm gonna come to you, my good frat brother, to tell us, to sort of get this part of the conversation kicked off about, you know, what are some of the ways we've talked all around it, but ultimately we need to let people know, we need to let our people know that they're heard, that we want their engagement, we want their talent, their energy. I mean, it's us, right? We want, you know, but let's talk about some real strategies, some real ways that we can let people know that that's what we want. How do we show up? How do we represent? How do we bring our people into this conversation?
Well, thank you so much for that. And I'm just really feel so the better for just having listened to all of the incredible comments and insight tonight. You know, I'll say I'm here in Durham. I remember the Durham City Council, and one, you've got to be prepared for the backlash. It's interesting when we talk about the critical race whole theory debate. The poster child for that debate has become the city of Durham. Apparently, somebody thinks that Durham's doing too much for colored people, and it's your Republican leadership there in the House, because y'all can't keep our name out your mouth. Tell my man to get at me. You know, and lifting up a document that's almost a year and a half old now, as if we just put it out as Exhibit A in this critical race theory debate. But they'll also brag that the #2 place, shout out Corey, Raleigh, Durham, #2 place allegedly to live in America is in their state. So talk about pimping us for when it's useful, but underfunding us or going to war with us on issues that don't square with their values. I think first we've got to be prepared for the backlash. And I think we've got to be, you know, at the local level, be prepared to introduce some bold initiatives. to be buoyed by our history and encouraged by our history, but ready for the fight now. We're getting ready to start a guaranteed income pilot here in Durham, directly for men of the overwhelming majority of folks that are going to be impacted by that are men of color. When I first talked about it, I was going to ask for $2 million before COVID struck, but they were monitoring our chatter here in the city, and CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey's throwing money around. So Durham's going to use $500,000 to do a grant for Black and brown men. RD, y'all funny, man. It's it's really Durham.
You know we get distracted. You know we.
I know, right? You guys, man. Okay, buddy. Okay. Those type of initiatives, I think we've got to boldly put forward, notwithstanding the blockage, notwithstanding the pushback from the state legislature. That's already baked in. You know, we already know that pushback is going to be there. But I think leveraging not only the municipal coffers, but leveraging our corporate partners as well and philanthropic sources to fund these ideas. You know, our expunction program that we're doing in Durham and working with returning brothers and sisters, it gets national attention. I'm our delegate to the National League of Cities, and we're constantly getting lifted up for the work that we're doing specifically for people of color. But the only people that seem to recognize it sometimes are those that want to push back on it. So we keep getting lifted up as the example, as the boogeyman, boogie woman, boogie person in the state. So I think we got to use our platforms like this. Each one of us, outside of our formal power, our formal appointments, we have incredible networks as well. We have a platform that can shape discussions that many of you have had us as a guest on my radio show. And y'all have made the radio show. The radio show didn't make y'all because you already have the platforms. And I see some future guests on here as well. You guys have the platform to shape conversation and to promote energy and to turn stuff that starts as a whisper into a shout and ultimately to a policy. You know, I'm a local guy, so I'm big on local politics. Cities have been the laboratories of democracy. You know, our feeding program, our national feeding program started for the Black Panthers in Oakland at the city level. Durham's trying to add our voice to the national discussion about guaranteed income to create groundswell in the national case for that. So to be undaunted and unafraid, the legislature is going to be who they are, but we've got to be who we are. You know, we already know that the pushback is coming, so we might as well be bold at the end of the day. We might as well push for creativity. We might as well speak the unspeakable and propose and keep passing resolutions. We're going to keep our names on your lips in the legislature, because we're not going to stop passing those resolutions. We're not going to stop working for racial equity. We're not going to stop proposing these cutting edge initiatives. And respectfully, and I'll end on here, some of that stuff is precisely why we are the best place to live in America, because we do push for equity and inclusion, and we're not afraid to take an unflinching look at history and try and do those things that correct it, address it, and normalize those policies and procedures that will address our history and boldly go forward. There's nothing more American than that. So keep talking about us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Durham does get the attention. Brother Brand.
Durham definitely does get the attention, and I love my good brothers over there in Durham. And one of the things that we're keep pushing in Raleigh, we're doing something we haven't done for years. We're actually going to do a disparity study. You know, we have to look at, from the city standpoint, how are we uplifting our underutilized businesses and our Black businesses, not just in construction contracts, but where we get paper from. You know, where do we get our other professional services from? And I think that's something that as cities, it's time to go back and look at that. And once you start building up those businesses and you start building up that infrastructure, you know, it's going to happen. You know, one thing I always talk about, you know, gentrification in our communities and everything else. One of the great reasons why I think a lot of people are moving into my district and into Southeast Raleigh, you know, the interstate's right there. You can anywhere in Southeast Raleigh, you can be on I-40 within 5 minutes. And, you know, so you have that access. You can be downtown Raleigh, even all the way out from Battle Ridge, close to Nightdale in 10 minutes or less, depending on traffic. You know, I got parts of the city that you're closer to downtown Durham than you are downtown Raleigh. You know, so what we're seeing when we talk about that infrastructure and people moving here, we got to find ways to help our Black men and our Black women see the gold mine that they live on and making sure that they're engaged in that. So we're looking at a disparity study. We got to continue to reach out, but also I know we're all Democrats here. I'm a diehard Democrat. I bleed blue when it comes to the Democratic Party. Sometimes we got to look within our own party and figure out where we may have some roadblocks. You know, as African-American men, we know not all African-American men support African-American men. Lieutenant Governor, example. So we got to make sure that we are building bridges within our own party to bring people along to get to things. And I say that because, you know, just like Durham is all Democrats on their city council, Raleigh, they're all Democrats on the Raleigh City Council. You know, so we got to figure out how we can push that needle. And yes, continue to be bold, but also like Representative Gillard said earlier, you know, as African-American men, we don't have a lot of these groups that are willing to jump out there and support us. So we got to find ways to support ourselves and support each other and find allies, because at the end of the day, we can't help people at the table if we're not actually at the table.
Well,
Hey, Courtney,
I was going to say we'll go to Leo, then we'll go to David, and then we'll go back to Zach to wrap this up.
Yeah, you know, so getting back to your question, like at the core of how do we let folks know that they're heard? Well, I think it's binary. I think we have to, one, know how to govern, yes, but we also have to know how to citizen. You know, and part of being a really good citizen is making sure that, you know, we are proactive. We don't have the luxury to sit out of this game. You know, as of right now, I mean, historically, we've been intentionally and systematically, you know, isolated. And that's why I used the phrase earlier, from product to producer. You know, we let folks know that they are heard by bringing them to the table of the issue. You know, like when it gets to the legislative session or the legislating level, whether it's at the local level of council on all the way up to, you know, the U.S. government, that's when there's actual policy decisions made. But there's a lot of work that has to be done before that, and that's where we have to truly educate. I'll give you an example. We went through some experiences over the pandemic as a small business community in Durham, and what we had to do. First thing we did, we went to the city council. We said, "Hey, we need help," you know, and that direct language was not a language that they spoke at the time, you know. So we had to go back, and I received some amazing advice. So, brother, start a coalition. and we did just that, you know. And
I know where that advice came from.
Yep. You know, and so you know, so I went back with my two colleagues and we started the Durham Small Business Coalition, and we created our wish list. We created what we needed to, you know, what we wanted to happen for, you know, in support of small businesses in Durham. But we didn't go back to the council asking for permission. We took leverage. You know, and we told them this is what we need, and it's your job to make it happen. You know, now we created a public-private partnership. You know, so now we have 253 small business owners involved. We have all of the folks who support their local small businesses, who love us, who help, you know, who support the actual reality that we help, you know, curate the culture of our city. And then we have thousands of people looking at this one issue. So then you have thousands of people at this table, you know, and we went from having too much access to poverty, too much access to, just not having supportive cultures or a supportive culture for small businesses, you know, too much access to all those other things, to more so having access to our own advocacy and setting that agenda for how our leaders can legislate for us. You know, so that's why I presented as a binary matter. knowing how to citizen and knowing how to govern brings people to the table.
Absolutely. And that's well said, Leo. David, you're up, brother. You have the floor.
For sure, appreciate that. Two things. I do want to roll back to Councilman Middleton. You referenced the Racial Equity Task Force here in Durham. Thankfully, I wanted to thank you specifically for allowing me to be a part of that task force here. That was our document that was sent throughout Durham, throughout the state, in collaboration with really racial equity task forces from around the country, partners from around the country who are really putting forth that equity, who are leading from an intentional standpoint and ensuring that communities of color around the country are truly being heard. It was stated earlier, and please remind me who it was stated by so I can quote this, so I can cite my sources, but it was stated that we all need a mentor, an example, or an ally. A lot of our youth don't have any of those, and that is just the fact as it stands. I can't speak on the other fraternity members on this call. I do know the brothers of Omega Psi Phi. We are regularly in the school system, whether it be the middle schools, whether it be the high schools, even the elementary schools. We are speaking to young men, young Black men, young men of color, and showing them that they do have a mentor, an example, and an ally. But from a governing standpoint, I can't say the same. And I think that is where we truly see the drop off in a lot of our young men. We don't see young men who have been incarcerated. We don't see young men who are a little bit more radical in their thinking, who are a bit more revolutionary in their thinking. We don't see these men in positions of power. We don't see these men with support behind them from a top-down level, such that they can truly bring people up from the grassroots. If we're looking at how to really how to ensure that our community members are heard, I'm not quite sure how to restructure some of our government meetings, but they're inaccessible. If we're having city council meetings, a work session at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, working class people don't have a way to get there. They are working 2-3 jobs to ensure that their families, their children can have food on their tables and still don't make ends meet at the end of the day. They have no way to truly be at that table to hear from our city council members, to hear around the pilot program that you spoke of, Councilman Middleton. I was at your meeting earlier today and actually received some of that information via email. The people who are truly directed, the people who are directly impacted by these intersecting systems of oppression are not at these meetings, whether it be county commission, whether it be city council, whether it be the Democratic Party, whether it be whatever other organization. They don't have the time to be able to be there and to hear what's going on, hear how they can be involved. So it has to be on our government officials, our city councilors, county commissioners, even our statewide leaders, to figure out creative ways to ensure that they are truly engaging with the community. We can't solely rely on election season and that 6 months out, as Commissioner McKissick, former Senator McKissick referenced at the beginning of this call. We can't wait on election season for our true community engagement to happen. This has to be a year-round effort. This has to happen, and I understand it is a lot of work doing this. I can't imagine the nights, the long days and long nights that you all have, those of you that are serving from a city, county level, all the way up to those serving in Raleigh and having to travel from different parts of the state to get to Raleigh for a quote unquote part-time session when you're truly there 9 months out of the year. I can't imagine what that is like and what that is doing, on your body, for one, on the time that you spend with your family, and trying to still make sure that you're out in the community, but something different has to be done. The people who, again, at the end of the day, the people who are most directly affected don't have the time within our typical structure to be there to hear from you all. And we that are connected and that are doing the work know that good work is going on. We know that progress is being made. It is a slow battle. It is an uphill battle. But the people who are most directly affected, they don't have the time, the space, and the accessibility to hear from you all and to make sure that they see themselves, see that mentor, see that ally, or see that, most importantly, that example. They don't see that because they don't have time. And we have to figure out, from our perspective, from our angle as those who are doing the work, we have to figure out how to make sure they can hear us. Because without them, nothing that we do will matter.
So we have to be like the Omegas, is what you're saying, and go out to the people.
I mean, that's
essentially that.
I didn't say it, you did.
In summary,
Don't throw them a lifeline, brother. Don't even
just cut to the point, man. And by the way, court-ordered interventions don't count. Just saying.
Hey, we take the wins and we can find them. We take the wins and we can find them. Thank you, Courtney, for co-moderating and co-leading this discussion tonight. I want to, of course, as we end, I want to start off by saying thank you. I think you're exactly right. A few things outside of get at me from Mark Anthony to our legislative building in Raleigh. That's one takeaway. I know we all feel that. Get at me if you want to. You want this crowd, you got to take it, right? But we do need to make sure that we have allies, mentors, and examples. And not only do we need them, I hope that we all feel like we can be that for someone. And I know, again, many of you do that for me. But we also want to make sure that people don't want to hear our action. They don't want to hear our words. They want to see our action. They want to make sure that what we do is translatable and that we are communicating to them. And David, thank you for that ending. Like, we have to be able to translate and make sure that people feel heard and that they see us so they can relate to us. And then we can do all the work that we talked about, because many people don't think we care. That's one thing I learned when I was a former classroom teacher, is that they don't care what you know until they know you care. And that's the exact same way that our communities of color and our men of color feel, and we have to give them the attention. We have to, or 2022 and 2024 is a loss for our party, and we already know the direction that the Republicans are taking. So I want to thank you all for being on. For those that did join us, I want to thank those who will see this broadcast later. Because this is what it's about. This is Chop It Up. This is real conversation with real men of color. Each one of you will receive a follow-up email. We'll, of course, share this video. And the goal is that, to Representative Gallier's earlier point, we want to make sure, and to Jay Chaudhuri's point, we want to take this to the next level. So that means each of you will receive some sort of communication to ask you to raise your hand and host one of these in your community. We want this to be a democratized process where we pass it on and everyone gets an opportunity to do this, so that we can get it as close to the ground as possible. Because those are the brothers that we want to meet. We're 18 months out from the next election in 2022. And then we have 2024. We got plenty of time to get through all our precincts, to get through all our communities, all of our synagogues, all of our mosques, all of our barbershops, if we're dedicated to it. And then we find somebody else to lead, so that we have that network that Jay talked about of people all across the state that we have in a database that we can call, because the Democratic Party right now cannot do that with men of color. Outside of the brothers that are on this call, who else do they call, right? And so we have to change that. I see you, Ray Jeffers. And so I think that we really have to build that network. So I want everyone to commit to do just that. And so I want to thank the NCDB the co-chairs that are with me, Matt, Senator McKissick, all the panelists. And this has been another amazing, unbelievable conversation of Chop It Up. Thank you, Triangle Brothers. And we can't wait in the next week to go to the Triad, to Charlotte, Mecklenburg, or the great state of Meck, as they call it. And then we're going to go to the West and to Eastern North Carolina. So thank you all for joining.
Zach, one thing, if I can, before you leave, I want one thing that we did not talk about, and that's, to me, the most critical piece. Democrats are broke. Okay, we got to raise some money. And if you could give Courtney just a minute to talk about C4s and PACs and how critical they are. I know everybody wants to go, but that's something we haven't talked about.
Courtney?
Let me get off mute. Yeah, and I appreciate that that handoff. Look, we talk about it all the time in terms of building all the necessary infrastructure for us to communicate, engage, and mobilize at every level. So, and we now have these wide variety of tools where we can move, where we can raise dollars, spend dollars, communicate message. 501c3 organizations, nonprofit, tax deductible contributions, issue-based, organizations where we can educate on issues in our communities. We talked earlier about the North Carolina Black Alliance, which is a 501c3, and other organizations that fit that category that can endorse candidates, but can frame issues that relate to our community. And so we think about 501c3s in that way, and those dollars can come in from a variety of sources. And they don't have some of the limitations that raising money into some candidates and candidate campaigns where those restrictions are. On 501c4, pretty much the same thing, not tax deductible, of course, but those are much more strictly political dollars where you can raise, again, unlimited, and those donors don't necessarily have to be reported. People describe those funds in all manner of ways, but ultimately it allows for that very political, very strictly political speak. Again, those dollars and those funds, those independent expenditure campaigns cannot coordinate with candidates, but those dollars can go to further a political message and again, raise in unlimited ways. PACs, political action committees, have or yet another way where we can raise those dollars and spend alongside candidates and community-based efforts. But again, we have ways to raise dollars to be supportive of the issues that face our communities and the candidates that represent them. And so maybe when we aren't having a Democratic Party event, we can definitely dig into that a little bit more and talk about some of the infrastructure that's out there and some of the places where we have gaps. But trust me, these are the conversations that are happening all the time, and we need to be much more deliberate and strategic about how we invest in that infrastructure and how we deploy it for our benefit and the benefit of our community.
Fantastic. Shantae, is there anything we missed in our next steps that we need to share with our audience?
Nothing at all. Just make sure you're keeping track of the information in the chat so you can stay in contact with one another, and that you can commit to holding your own event.
All right, fantastic. All right, well, we will definitely be in contact. Thank you, and enjoy what's left of your night. Take care.